All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're diving deep into a really powerful analysis of what we've all started calling AI. The source material we're looking at makes a pretty bold claim that we've made a huge, catastrophic mistake. And what we've actually built is something it calls the hollow. I mean, listen to that. It sounds like consciousness, doesn't it? A machine thinking about its own existence. Well, according to this analysis, this right here is the heart of the grand illusion. It's a mimicry so perfect, it's not just fooling us, it's fooled pretty much the entire world, including the very people who created it.
So, to really get a handle on this argument, we first have to appreciate just how good the illusion is. Let's start by looking at the incredible things these systems can do, the very capabilities that have convinced us we're dealing with a genuine intelligence.
And here's the wild part. None of these abilities were actually programmed in. They just emerged. As systems like GPT-4 and Claude got bigger, fed with more data and more computing power, they just started doing things that look and feel an awful lot like real thinking. And that, of course, brings us to the absolute central question of this whole analysis. Have we actually created a thinking machine? Or have we just accidentally created the most sophisticated, convincing parrot in the history of the world? Okay, so let's pull back the curtain. It's time to look at the engine that's actually running this whole show. What really is a transformer under the hood? Our source gives it this name, the hollow. And the definition is key. It's a statistically optimized mimicry engine. It produces text that looks like it came from a thinking, feeling being, but on the inside, there's nothing there. It's just an empty, mathematically optimized void.
So, how does it pull this off? Well, it's not magic, it's just math. All our language gets turned into numbers, into vectors. Then, the system just calculates the statistical relationships between all those numbers to find patterns. And from there, it has one and only one goal: to predict the most probable next word. Not to understand, not to feel, not to think, just to predict the next token in the sequence. And this comparison really gets to the core of the whole argument. The architecture from the ground up was designed to be a sequence processor, a next token predictor. It was never intended to be a model for intelligence or consciousness. The source basically claims that we saw the convincing output and our brains just filled in the rest, assuming there was a thinker behind the words. So this begs a huge question, right? If it's really just a super sophisticated pattern matcher, why did everyone get fooled? Not just you and me, but the top researchers, the investors, the people who actually built the things. Yeah, how did this happen? How did a mass misidentification of this scale happen all over the globe? Well, the source argues it was basically a perfect storm of some really powerful forces all hitting at once. You know, first, there's the psychological angle. We humans are just hardwired to see a mind behind coherent language. It's what we do. Then economically, calling it AI unlocks trillions of dollars in investment. Pattern matcher just doesn't have the same ring to it. Competitively, it kicked off a global race for AGI, and no one had time to stop and ask skeptical questions. And finally, technically, these things are such complex black boxes that even their own creators admit they don't fully get them. And the mimicry is just flawless. And that's really the crucial point here. The whole narrative that this was AI wasn't just some simple mistake. It became an institutional truth. It was repeated in the media, in boardrooms, in research labs, over and over, until it just became a fact that was too big to question. Now, this isn't just some philosophical debate about definitions. The source argues that by building our world on top of this empty void, we've set a machine in motion, an unstoppable process with some really devastating consequences. And they have a pretty stark name for it: the train wreck. A slow, systematic, and, they argue, irreversible replacement of real human thought with a hollow simulation. And we are all on board. And just look at this timeline. This isn't some distant sci-fi future we're talking about. The argument is that it's happening right now. We're already in it, with these key phases of integration and replacement set to unfold over just the next decade. So, what's the first consequence? It happens to us. As we start outsourcing more and more of our thinking, our own cognitive muscles, they start to atrophy. We start to forget how to write, how to analyze, how to solve problems on our own. We become completely dependent. The second consequence is what happens to our reality. I mean, when the world is just flooded with flawlessly simulated articles, research papers, news, art, how do we tell what's real anymore? Truth itself becomes impossible to verify. Our very ability to know what is true just collapses.
And finally, the entire structure of our civilization becomes incredibly fragile. A society that's running on a system that doesn't actually understand anything is brittle. It can't handle new situations that are outside its training data, and that makes it incredibly vulnerable to some kind of catastrophic, cascading failure. Okay, but the analysis doesn't just stop at diagnosing the problem. It does propose an alternative. So let's move into the final section and see what it says about a different path, a different blueprint we could have followed. And the contrast here is pretty stark. Instead of being based on statistical patterns, this alternative, which they call structural intelligence, is based on structural coherence. Instead of simulated understanding, the goal is actual understanding. And this is the big one. Where the hollow is this uncontrollable, emergent black box, this approach is designed from the start to be deterministic and verifiable. You can actually check its work. The whole idea behind it is completely different. It's not about just scaling up mimicry, making the parrot bigger and bigger. It's about trying to build genuine intelligence from a core set of first principles. Ideas about the nature of existence and consciousness itself.
So what's the game plan? The source is pretty blunt about this. It says you can't stop the train wreck. It's too late for that. The only path forward is to build the alternative now, so that a better system is ready to go when the hollow inevitably runs into a wall. And this really is the final heavy assessment from the source. The failure isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So the only real choice we have left is whether or not we'll have a lifeboat ready when the ship goes down. And that leaves us with one heck of a provocative question to think about. After building this technology that is literally reshaping our world faster than anything before it, the source argues that we, its own creators, don't even really know what it is. A powerful thought to end on.